Well, welcome everyone. We're very excited to have you all here this morning. And with that, I'll introduce our spotlight speaker, Jillian Christy, here with 10,000 Villages Lincoln. And she has a presentation for us, and then afterwards we'll have opportunity for question and answer time with her.
So, good morning. Usually I start off these presentations by asking who has heard of the store or who has been to the store, but over like 2/3 of this group I got to visit with earlier this week, so they might be a little bit redundant. But welcome. I am very excited to be here with you this morning and chat a little bit about our store. We were started in 1981 by a group of Lincolnites who are really interested in the idea of fair trade, and we're really committed to bringing the movement to Lincoln and the Lincoln community. And today we have remained focused on that mission and that goal. Our store represents over 20,000 different artisan partners in actually right at 30 countries at present. And we are working with those artisan partners to help earn fair living wages up front for their handicraft goods. And that is what the mission of fair trade is all about. So I'm sure at this stage you're probably asking, like, what is fair trade? How can a store be nonprofit? And those are probably the two most common questions I get asked. And I figured I would come here today and help provide a little bit of information about what is the fair trade business model and why is it unique and different kind of from traditional retail. But yeah, no, my board chairwoman actually had the pleasure of speaking with this group last month, and she said that there were a lot of lingering questions about the movement and the business model. So I'm here today to chat about it. So I guess feel free to stop me at any time. I'm happy to discuss questions as they come up. But first off, fair trade. What is fair trade? It is the radical idea that our partners and our makers all over the world should be treated equitably and receive a fair living wage for their handicraft goods. It seems like, well, yeah, that's a no-brainer, right? But unfortunately, in traditional retail, that's not always the case, especially when it comes to large international and national retail chains that are very commonly not privately but publicly owned. The emphasis is on trying to be as profitable as possible. And while being profitable is not a bad thing, trying to run a successful business is not a bad thing. A lot of times when you overexpand and become such a large organization, it's easy for the smaller pieces and the structures and the operational processes to kind of get overlooked for the sake of those profits. And that's where fair trade tries to help right those wrongs. It's all about not only thinking about the end consumer and what they want to purchase and how they want to purchase it, but also thinking about, well, how is that impacting the makers and the people along the entire supply chain, and how can we help make sure that everyone is treated equitably. And so that is where fair trade comes in. Actually started back in the 1940s, believe it or not, but slowly growing to become an international movement. It is now the fair trade movement is now present on all 6 continents, because it's not going to be in Antarctica. But to that end, there are a number of national and international certifying bodies that help kind of set the standard for what do those ethical principles mean, and what can we as a consumer expect when we see something that's labeled fair trade, and how can we know that when something says it's fair trade, what standards they're upholding themselves to. So in an effort to kind of provide a little bit of resource on how can you be a little bit more ethical consumer, I did want to first highlight these organizations. Now our store focuses primarily upon craft. crafts, jewelry, home accessories, scarves, a variety of goods outside of consumable products. It's just a little bit of a different business model when it comes to fair trade coffees and teas. The principles are still very much the same, but it's a little bit different working principles. So the Fair Trade Federation and World Fair Trade Organization are actually going to be the two most commonly known and recognized certifying bodies internationally. And the Fair Trade America is the most commonly known and recognized certifier for food products within North America. So let's see. We still haven't quite defined yet, though, what are those ethical principles. Now, each of the certifying bodies are going to have slightly different ways that they define what those standards are and what they mean. In general, though, they are all celebrating and highlighting the same key core principles. So these are the principles of the World Fair Trade Organization, and they are focused on working with those that are most at risk within their communities in developing parts of the world, trying to find ways to be as transparent along all aspects of the supply chain so that we can make sure that everyone is able to have that conversation about what does equity look like for them and make sure that everyone is being given their fair shot. It's all about also primarily making sure everyone is able to earn a sustainable living, and as well as making sure that the working conditions are livable and sustainable. So we're not forcing folks to work for extended periods of times for low amounts of money, but there's safe working environments, and we're empowering those to be able to use their voices within the businesses. It's also about working with those to artisan partner groups to help them develop their businesses as well, because we're all going to succeed together. And so it's best to try to help folks grow their businesses so that they can help grow our business. It's all about collaboratively, we all succeed or we all fail. As well as just trying to do things as environmentally sustainable as possible. That way we can, it's a sustainable movement, not just for the environment, but also for the mission and of fair trade as a whole. So, any questions so far? Still doing okay? Okay. So, one of the other things that I get asked the most relates to Principle 4, fair payment, right? A lot of folks will come in and they will be like, well, so how much of this item that I'm going to purchase from you is actually going back to the artisan partner? And it's kind of a trick question that people don't realize that they're asking, because the way that we work, we're actually trying to make sure that the artisans are receiving fair living wages up front. That way they're not waiting on us to sell the product in order to get a commission back. Take it quick. So at the very start of the supply chain, it starts with an open conversation with our artisan partners about what we're seeing in our market, what our customers are interested in purchasing, what features they're looking for, as well as the artisan sharing, any new skills that they're developing, what they're finding successful, and collaboratively putting those two things together to develop a product that we think is going to sell well in a North American market. We then have a lengthy discussion about, okay, well, what is a fair wage price for that item? And there's a lot of calculations. And while we cannot put a number on any particular item from group to group, there is the math behind it is very much the same. As you can imagine, a fair wage in Guatemala is very different from a fair wage in Peru, is different from Kenya, is different from India, is different from Vietnam. So instead we have to do a lot of math to try to figure out what does a living wage actually look like for those artisans in that country. So we're factoring in things like, what is the average family size for that artisan? Like, are they having to take care of grandma or grandma and grandpa? Is the average number of kids like 2? Is it 4? How many people do they need to be able to support? What does the typical housing situation look like? What are the utilities for that housing situation? typical diets, so provide for food costs adequately. We're trying to, as you would budget your own life, try to figure out what does a budget look like for a livable wage look like for those artisans. So we factor that in with the raw material costs for the product that we've developed, as well as any overhead costs for, if they are operating out of a workshop, what are the overhead costs for that? Altogether, we figure out what that fair wage price comes to per item. We then place the order for that developed product that we've collaboratively put together. And then once we place that order with them, we're actually getting them 50% of that order upfront. That way, it enables them to be able to pay their workers while they are producing the good. They're able to purchase the raw materials, and they're able to do that without taking out predatory loans, which is going to set them back financially. This way, they're better equipped to be able to be successful as a business. They then get about making the goods that we've contracted with them. They produce the item, they get it to the port of export. They say, hey, we've created the shipping information, it's on its way to you. We say, great, here's the remaining 50%. That way, by the time the product itself hits the water and it's on the way to the US, the artisans have already been paid in full. So if right. In contrast, traditional retail is oftentimes net 30, net 60, net 90 upon arrival. So you can imagine from the time of product development and production and then shipping in a container across the ocean, heaven forbid it gets stuck up in the Suez Canal, right? It can be a very long time for those producers to receive wages, let alone a sustainable living wage. That's where we really try to help make the difference. We find that by this method helps to better support our artisans, not only financially, but by doing the financial support, they're able to really invest in the future, invest in the artisans' livelihoods and the livelihoods of those artisans' families. We talk about supporting 20,000 individual artisans around the world, but you have to think about how many family members are all of those artisans themselves supporting with those fair wages and incomes, right? So it gets on the boat, we make it to the store. At that stage, we do mark it up because we need to pay for our overhead costs as our store, as well as our staff of 3 people. Then any profits that we make over, again, we are a nonprofit organization, so we're not paying out shareholders, we're not paying out an owner. Any profits we make over and above our cost of doing business get immediately reinvested back into our artisan partners in the form of additional orders. That way we can help continue the cycle of fair trade and fair wages and helping to continue to support our artisan partners with sustainable wages and incomes. So. Yeah, still doing okay? Any questions? All right, cool. So this is, in a nutshell, the fair trade business model, and it's what we do. I was just chatting with Jody a little bit. Is running a business bad? No. Is making a profit bad? No. But it's all about trying to do things as ethically as possible and find ways that we can lift up others as we are doing it. And it's great because, again, the fair trade movement started in the 1940s, while our specific store started in 1981. We're part of a larger network of stores that has been around since 1946. That organization has helped develop a lot of the artisan co-ops that are now independent that we are working with today. A lot of those we helped organize and provide resources to back into the 80s and the 70s and 80s and 90s. So our average buying relationship with an artisan enterprise is 25 plus years. And it's wonderful because in that amount of time, we're able to see the impact that our business has had, right? We're able to touch base with different makers within our partner groups and be able to see the real impact that we're having on their lives. So, for example, this is the story of Reena. She lives in Bangladesh. She works at a artisan cooperative called Perked, and more specifically the Beborton Paper Company portion of Perked, and they are making paper products out of water hyacinth. It is a plant-based product, has a tendency to clog up the waterways that they use for irrigation in Bangladesh. So very readily renewable, and is actually even beneficial to be using, harvesting and using for producing their paper. It's a group that traditionally focuses on women, that most are widows, divorcees, or for whatever reason, they're the primary breadwinner for their family. Now, Reena came to Perked and Beborton Paper Company. She does have a husband, but he is a seasonal day laborer. So just very piecework, agricultural work and building work where he can find it. And unfortunately, his wages were not enough to be able to support their family, their children. And so when Reena went to Beborton and said, hey, I really need help, they took her in. And through the years, she's been able to become very successful. She's the primary dyer for the fabric. She is the one everyone goes to now because she has the most expertise. And she is one of their kind of management, she's a leader in the group. But with her extra incomes and wages, she was able to purchase a hand cart for her husband. That way he's not having to do piecework where he can get it. He can run his own business. They were able to purchase 2 cows that they could use to help support their family with food, but also be able to sell some of the extra milk to produce more money. They were able to purchase more food regularly and to be able to send their kids to school. Their son went through dental school, and her daughter went through nursing school. And it's again, I think a really great way to highlight how, fair trade is about the longevity, and it's about the commitment, and it's about a really long-term commitment, because we're able to see how the impacts are positively changing our artisan partners' lives. So yeah, that is majority of what I had today. The only thing I'll leave y'all with is that, your dollar has a vote, right? What you buy really impacts the world you want to see. If you decide you want to see more organic food in your grocery store, and you go back and you keep asking for organic food and you only purchase the organic food, eventually the grocery store is going to start carrying more organic food, right? It's the same way with fair trade. If we are able to try to advocate for fair trade and seek out the kind of labels and certifications that align with our standards and our ethics, we're able to better help direct the market through our purchasing power to be able to support the fair trade movement and artisans around the world. And I feel like when I say this and I leave this with folks, that it's a little bit about telling everybody like you need to switch to veganism, and it's just like maybe try a meatless Monday every once in a while, right? There's small little changes that you can make. Fair trade coffee and tea is definitely a very easy one to go about, but there's also a whole network of certified fair trade stores around the country. We are very proudly one. And that way you're able to go in and confidently shop know that every single item that you purchase or are interested in is positively impacting someone somewhere in the world. So, all right. That is it for me. Any questions?
Before I turn it over to their questions,
yeah.
Can you share with us a little bit about how you became involved with?
Oh, yeah. Great question. So I've been with 10,000 Villages for almost 5 years now. And my background is in traditional retail. I went through the University of Nebraska-Lincoln for merchandising. And my first job right out of college was with JCPenney at their corporate headquarters in the Dallas area. And it was not a good personal fit. It was a lot of corporate bureaucratic politics, and eventually I tried figuring out my own different way, and the opening for this position came up at 10,000 Villages. And it's funny, I was talking about those 8 Lincolnites who were really interested in fair trade and starting the movement. I think about 4 of them were members of one of the churches that I had grown up going to. So they were like, "Hey, Jillian, you should really apply for this." And I was like, yeah, no, that could be fun. So, because I had grown up going to the store over the years, and it was always a fun time, and it just has been a really great experience for me personally. So, yeah.
We always ask all of our spotlight speakers these 2 questions.
Okay.
What keeps you motivated and perked up to stay engaged with this mission?
Oh my gosh, just the mission and the stories and the people. I actually had the pleasure of getting to travel to Kolkata, India in 2019 to visit some of our artisan partners. And their stories and their experiences still live with me today, and just how grateful they were and how happy they were, and just like some of the personal information that they had shared about, there was this one of the groups that I visited is called Silence. It works primarily with folks that are deaf or otherwise differently abled. And through some interpreters, we were able to see just how much their lives had been changed by having somebody who can help them navigate the bureaucratic system to better be able to access the disability services that were available. And they even had a housing program, and just the ability for them to have some community and a safe place to go at the end of the day. It was really great. So the mission is definitely what keeps me perked up. Yeah.
That's amazing. I can imagine stories like.
Oh, there's so many. There's so many. So.
Fantastic. I mean, I think it would be really easy to stay motivated to be engaged with these stories. Besides your store, do you have a favorite local restaurant or business that you like to shop at?
Sapan.
Yes.
Sapan is a fair trade local organization. I wish I had they do leather goods from Thailand. It was started by a local gal to Lincoln. Her name is Brooke Mullen. She was in the Peace Corps. She spent, I think, 10 years in Thailand and was just able to kind of start her own fair trade organization and business making leather goods, and working with a very just small group of talented leather artisans, and she's grown it into such a successful business, and I just love all of her products. And beautiful bags. I highly recommend checking them out. And she's just a great example of how fair trade can start small, and it can be anywhere, and you don't have to be in a big city to make a big impact. So, yeah.
Excellent. That's a great one.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have questions, comments?
So, obviously, 10,000 Villages was started by a group of individuals, and you are nonprofit.
Yeah.
And so, do you have partners that help in a financial way with your store, with the organization?
Great question. I wish. It's again, because There's a lot that goes into our business model, and it's not something, I wish there was an easier way to condense this presentation into like the 30-second elevator speech, because most people that interact with our business are thinking like, oh, well, you sell goods and that's your source of income and that's how you're successful. And so it is a little bit of a struggle to help people wrap their minds around, like we are still a nonprofit organization. We still do take donations, and it helps us put even more money into our artisan orders. So we have attempted applying for grants, but and we've tried to make efforts to raise funds just as donations themselves, but generally speaking, they're not overly successful. And again, I think that's because we're just trying to be able to better communicate this mission in a condensed format to help people realize that when you're helping us, you aren't helping us, you're helping all of our artisan partners around the world. So yeah, I guess the answer is I wish we had more donors, more supporters. But in the meantime, thankfully we're able to plan our financial budgets and strategy around kind of a more traditional retail calendar so that we can continue to remain financially successful and viable throughout the year. Primarily relying upon our retail sales. But I would love to talk to you about nonprofit donations and foundation grants. So, yes.
So, does 10,000 Villages qualify for the Give to Lincoln?
We do. We do participate in that every year. We generally get about $2,000 to $4,000 a year, which definitely absolutely helps. Helps us keep up to date in terms of our own infrastructure, as well as, I said, put funds into our artisan partner orders. So there's another one in the back. Yes?
Yeah, leading off this question, I was wondering, now you reinvest and you're in that cycle, but how did they initially start, I guess? Did those initial ladies invest themselves, or how did they get the first start going?
The artisan partners or the folks in Lincoln?
Like the whole financial aspect of launching the nonprofit before you had
Yeah.
to sell.
Yeah. So back in the 80s, it was everybody who was helping with the store and get it up and running was doing it as a volunteer opportunity. I'm not sure exactly how they pooled the funds together, and I think it might have just been a lot of donations and kind of personal investment from the original 8 founders to be able to place one small order with an artisan partner group, and then they brought those items in, and then they marked them up and they sold them. And thankfully, in the beginning, they didn't have a lot of those operational costs that they were having to use their profits to pay out. Like they were selling out of a church for a while, and then one of the 8 founders was actually a dentist, and so they had kind of like a whole setup in like a separate room of his office that they weren't paying rent for, and they didn't have any paid staff. So everyone who was originally starting was doing it as their own personal time investment. So they were able to slowly start it that way and reach out to some church networks to do little sales at different churches and kind of slowly build the momentum there until they were able to open up their first shop. Apparently it was on it was like right in this neighborhood. It was off of like O Street and 70th, I think, and it was on a second story something. Maybe it was 70th and A, actually. But they had a very small shop, and then from there they grew and were able to move into the shops at Piedmont, which a number of people still remember us as. We started off as Helping Hands Handicrafts, and we're in that strip mall for a number of years, 15, 20 years, until they opened up the shop in the Haymarket. So, does that answer the question? Yeah. It was just really a labor of love for those first founders.
I'm curious, can you share how you, how an artisan gets connected with you or vice versa?
Yeah. So there's a variety of ways. Either the organization itself will reach out to kind of a network of artisans, and that's really how it started back in the beginning in the 70s and 80s when the movement was getting going, and there really weren't formally organized artisan cooperatives around the world. 10,000 Villages and other kind of fledgling fair trade movements would use their resources to kind of help bodies of artisan makers formally organize into artisan cooperatives and provide them with the tools and resources and how do you do product development, how like basic business organizational finances and things like that. As the movement grew, a lot of artisans either started forming cooperatives on their own, or different governments would help start or even independent NGOs would help start up these artisan cooperatives. And so then those groups would reach out to 10,000 Villages and we would get connected that way. Today it's kind of a combination of the two. It's primarily a lot of the groups themselves are established, and if somebody reaches out and they're like, hi, we're really small and we really want to kind of get the movement going, like instead of helping provide them with the tools and resources to formally organize from afar, there's enough tools and resources within their own countries and other established partners that we can help pair them up with and help them get coordinated and organized. Because again, as we mentioned, these are Fair Trade Federation and World Fair Trade Organization are two international bodies, but there's the Fair Trade Federation of India, there's the Fair Trade Federation of Nepal, and they're programs and organizations and resources to help primarily makers and artisan cooperatives get the tools and resources that they need to grow and reach the developed markets in the world. So, yeah.
You said that your store is mostly crafts, handmade goods, things like that. Does each of the 10,000 Villages, do they all kind of tailor their store?
Yeah, yes. So as a well, and I should say too, so fair trade certification. You can be certified fair trade as an artisan producer group. You can be certified fair trade as a larger wholesaler, importer, exporter, and you can be certified fair trade as a retail store. And so we are certified fair trade as a retail store. All the products that we sell are also going to be products that were produced by certified fair trade artisan cooperatives. And you're going to have to repeat the question because I forgot where I was going with that.
I was just wondering if each store gets to pick their,
Yes.
their own
Yes.
items.
Yes. So while we do get to tailor our product assortment from each independent 10,000 Villages store to better suit our own market, as a certified fair trade store, all the products in our store are still going to be certified fair trade, even though product assortment to product assortment might not be an identical match. Sorry, that's where I was going with that comment.
You're good.
Okay.
Is your jewelry from your store?
It is. It's a little bit old. Unfortunately, both of these pieces are discontinued, but it's kind of fun. It's made out of tagua. It's a nut native to the northern part of South America, and it's often called vegetable ivory. Apparently it's not an edible nut, and so basically the thing that they can do with it is craft, and it looks like elephant ivory. It's carved like elephant ivory. It's just not from elephants, and so they can dye it into a bunch of different fun colors and stuff. And it's definitely one of the very fun materials that we have represented in the store.
Very cool.
So, yeah. On that note, I guess I should say I have left little flyers about the large annual holiday sale that happens on Veterans Day weekend every year. It's going to be 25% off the store. So if you too want to get some fair trade jewelry or any other holiday gifts, yes, please come on down. It'll be a good time. So, all right.
Any other questions or comments? Well, thank you so much for being here. This
Been my
is,
pleasure.
I was very unfamiliar with fair trade. Of course, I knew about it. I just didn't know how it worked.
That is what we encounter all day, every day. So we're always happy to help provide a little bit of background. So
Thank you for sharing this with us, and we'll all be shopping at your store very soon.
Awesome. Love to see you all.
Thank you everybody for coming. Feel free to stay afterwards, have more coffee, have more donuts. If you've got questions you want to ask Jillian privately, I'm sure she would be happy to chat with you, and stay and hang out, and we will see you all next week. Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks, Brooke. Appreciate it. I'll give that. Well, I suppose I